is na hol sui Charles yes. Sisna Ginny sodzil dog osli de bensa. Zil now ditli jol shiche hasht a1 shiche ha elthe. Yolka yasna shama asanad le shama. Na dal kay ashki na da sui ed. Yoda tras nilzil atras Tro tro atras chin trobillage tre de danish alt aniet ed. Sa na re bik ahwajon. Kodoye ata lianigi ye ben nachiko kodoye ndel nish ye diku kodo. Ye diku wat ye achis kre ye diku. Ian lini. Ben nache ye diku jo ha dillisto oho ashi ben nachiko ye diku elhis lini kre ye diku kodo. Do diku sto traji ada dilligi de ye diku ben nache. A chehe si de don ni ligi ye ben nache inte. Kodo a chehe de di nil. A da lianigi ben nache. A kodo nege dat is enkele ye diku a da lianigi. Nige chain hinale. Niga alchinita. Be jinda hot igita ye diku yadas o. Pa khani zen ye diku kodo di en leni. Beben nache ye diku be beben nache de iku without ilya ye diku do a de neji ki go shin lo ye diku bil behdo zin lo ben nache lo ilya oko diku lo dj Native American month ben nache lo ye asho de ye diku kodo nilhiln lido do ben ich ba ho jodo jo ben nache go ye without the United States of America ben nache ye nihil sango ye diku adayila oko pa hani zendo ye diku kodo di leni dahil sanigi do a ben nache ko ye diku Washington ben nache the ku Build Back Better plan when yanigi ndi ye diku de ye ba si kre ye diku ada yanigi a ben nache ko ashon kodo nasko ilya jo ben nache iki beso do la ko nana ye diku nihita do selti no ye diku ata lianigi ya ata lianigi ben nache ye diku nihik do yedene as tuido sani do bejenta hot igi ye la ko ye da do selto ye diku beso la o nana nasko oho ahiki do ata lianigi ben nache ko ilya nasko asho Hanan dolni. Hansen do bahwani sen ye dikun kodo. Oko eben na chiko ye dikun shi enna solto ilyago. Kanti ye dikun ye eta todo tilto oho ben na chiki ye nasko be nilzeldo ye dikun. Ata lianiki ye edon hidene. Donan nasko dishi Belgana da ye diku dojini da benata oze belhihe nesh ye diku khanti ye ben ye khana ye hot eto jono ye aka ye iltieto alki nil neshto ben nachko ye diku ay siki nihik do hin dinne stuido sani ne khalchinda bich enda hot igita ben nache ye diku na nishiki ilya Bahani zen ye diku kodo din lini ben hikitten ito kanti ye diku benana hahilsi to ye diku kodo din lini ben hahil nito ben ye thanana hulsodo ben ye sakhes ye diku jondo ye diku kodo din lini jo ben nache go diku ni stuido zani ye diku pa it bahani zen Je no sleep, je no sleep, je no sleep, je no sleep. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today for the mixer And it has been my pleasure and honor not to be speaking to you today and to provide the prayer for our mixer. We're very, very excited and thankful that our interpretations are not only in English and in Spanish, but we have them in Dinibazad, and we'll have that information for you coming forward. But in part of my um, thankfulness for this mixer and for speaking to you today is recently, it's Native American month right now, and we're being recognized as being here, the first nation, the first Americans in this great land. And also having we had a group had went to Washington, D.C., and we were able to march, and I was able to speak to the senators for the Build Better Back plan, which is offering 1.5 billion to be brought in for our caregivers as a nationwide, as far as the United States. And thankfully, we had some very good news that it actually passed the House. So our efforts in going out to Washington and being able to bring some of our caregivers out there as well to notice this and witness it and be another part of history, as this will be passed. And that's what we said, and that's what we fought for. And it was really, really awesome to see Nancy Pelosi be behind us, so many other senators be behind us and say, when this bill passes. And that is our intention. That is what we want, because our caregivers mean so, so much to us. You guys have the biggest hearts, and a lot of you do this job without getting paid. But we have these resources for you, and we have training that is free. We have different information for you to help you to assist taking care of my mom, my dad, my grandmas and grandpas, Ainolis, and our children. That means a lot to us. And what you do is not something small. If you weren't doing what you were doing, who would be the one to take over? And for somebody that needs help, you come in and you help us so selflessly. And I just appreciate every one of you, and so thankful that you were here today and get to hear a lot more about what our programs do and what we're doing, and just how excited we are to have a little fun here and with Thanksgiving. So, yeah, Adrian?
Thank you, Valerie. Thank you so much. That kind of easily brings tears to one's eyes. And I appreciate the way you opened for us. My name is Adrienne Smith. I'm the president and the CEO of the New Mexico Caregivers Coalition. I also wanted to thank personally the folks who did participate on our behalf, on all of our behalf, from New Mexico and from Arizona early this week. Chinda Bukowski, if you're on, Antoinette Sandoval, Rosalinda Benali, La Quinta Yellowman, and Pam Stafford. And it's just wonderful that you were able to take time out of your day, your week, and go to Washington, D.C. and be heard. I'm going to share with you a little bit more about what the New Mexico Caregivers Coalition does. By sharing with you resources that we are bringing to caregivers. In so doing, for the next few minutes, I want to tell you a little bit about the coalition. I want to tell you about who we are in our organization. And for most of you, many of you, I hope this is not just a moment to display gratitude, but I want you to know how we're trying to help with a little cash and merchandise too. The organization that we started in 2009 advocates for direct care workers education, training, benefits, wages, and professional development. It is so that caregivers can better serve people who are elderly and those with disabilities. We are a 501c3 organization, and we started in 2009 in New Mexico. We serve family caregivers, and we also serve paid professional caregivers. My name is Adrienne Smith, and the other person that you see up here is Dana Howarth. She's the program director. Bridget Cobb is attending today as a participant with you. This is actually her afternoon off. Thanks for being here, Bridget. Valerie Sosi, who you met, is an outreach manager with us. And Nikki Sebastian is also an outreach manager with us. And so I hope you're attending because you got notice of a newsletter, or more likely, you probably know one of us who maybe by word of mouth, either through family member, friend, or one of the people who works with the coalition. You just come here because one of us asked you to come. As you have questions, by the way, you can put them in either place. You can put them in the chat box, or you're certainly welcome also to put that in the Q&A. What do we do? Well, we like to say that what we do well is that we convene stakeholders. Stakeholders to me means anybody who has an interest in caregivers, period. So that usually means caregivers, but sometimes it means care recipients, employers, foundation executives, state agency officials, local officials, and even elected officials. We also like to think that what we do well is demonstrate the multiple ways that caregivers could be working better. So we develop, for example, a good jobs code, what it means to have a good job, things like flexibility and scheduling, things like respect and recognition on the job, things like stability with regard to scheduling. We also incubated a home care cooperative, the first in the Rocky Mountain region. We also developed programs over the course of our lifetime, really directed at caregivers, so that, for example, you as a caregiver, you don't get hurt. Because we know and we figure that coming out the door, you're already concerned about your client. And so many of you, that's why you do the work you do. But it could be that maybe if you're on the job, nobody's ever showed you how to lift, move, or transfer someone so that you don't get hurt. We advocate for and we support all types of caregivers. And this has kind of been a long time coming in terms of, in the 12 years that we've existed, we weren't really certain where our audience would be. I think what we've tried to do is make a realistic but also intentional decision that anybody who wants to be a part of the coalition belongs with the coalition. So this is our definition, and I find that it's an extant definition across the country too. A family caregiver would be a person who cares for a family member with or without pay. You could be an unpaid family caregiver, but you could also be a paid family caregiver through a local program or from a tribal program. If you're a professional caregiver, you're a person who is in the workforce and you're paid to care for a client who's not a family member. You might also be a family caregiver. You might also work as a professional caregiver, but then go home and care for someone at home as an unpaid family caregiver. In that case, you're serving in both roles, a family and a professional caregiver. As a result of a community care corps grant, which I'll talk to you about, we found that care recipients are often sitting right alongside caregivers in the trainings and the events and the mixers that we do too. And importantly, again, we don't turn anybody away. You come, you belong there. You might notice or remember that the second part of the mission from one of the first slides I shared we help and support caregivers so that they can better serve people who are elderly and those with disabilities. So persons who are elderly and those with disabilities are specifically named in our mission statement. And we know through research at all levels that a care recipient's well-being is directly linked to caregivers' well-being. The happier and less stressed out that caregivers are, the better off their clients and family members are going to be. So, what are the kinds of programs that we have and what do we do? Well, we do advocacy in a big way, we hope, like as an example, what Valerie talked about at in her opening. We do advocacy at the federal level and also at the state level. We have, as Dana and Bridget can tell you, we have as many callers to our office of people who are looking for resources as we do caregivers looking for work. So we advocate for caregivers, we refer people to resources, both caregivers to resources, but also care recipients to resources. A big part of the work that we do is in-person training and online training since the COVID pandemic began. And these are programs that we developed. We do infection prevention. We do safe transfer and mobility. We do financial security because again, going back to an earlier slide, your well-being economically is directly tied to how well your care recipients do. We also developed a program around recognizing and reversing opioid overdose, which is really important in this great state of New Mexico because we're a good Samaritan. We've got a good Samaritan law. So we help caregivers understand when they might be seeing an opioid overdose. And then talking through how to reverse it too. We do a customized training for caregivers, and oftentimes that's requested by employers. That includes a lot of these additional points here on the bottom: communication skills, ethical legal responsibilities of home care, career pathways, and self-care for caregivers. And over this last 20 months, we've also spent a lot more time with Aging and Long-Term Services Senior Medicare Patrol, so having them serve as guest speakers on Medicare fraud and talking at length about the resources available in New Mexico through our state Department of Aging and Long-Term Services. And dementia care specialists will often talk in a joyful way of caring for loved ones with dementia, how to use art and creativity and things like that. So any course that you go through, that you take through us or with us, it results in a certificate of completion. And most of the programs that we offer now pay cash stipends, and not only to unpaid family caregivers, but also now to paid professional caregivers. So that's what I want to talk to you about a little bit more about this cash stipend program. In 2021, we won a Community Care Corps grant, which you might know that when our now Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham was a member of Congress, one of the last things that she did as a member of Congress was to design and then get past Community Care Corps. That was a huge thing. And the purpose of that act at the federal level was to reduce social isolation and the stress of care recipients. The way we wrote our proposal was, we knew that we could help that outcome by helping caregivers. And so we are now in our second year. We're one of 33 grantees of the Community Care Corps grant, and our grant concludes next September. That grant allowed us to start awarding cash stipends to family caregivers and care recipients, even if they live in the same home. So this mixer today that you're attending is really what we're doing is we're sharing information about how you can do that, how you can earn this cash stipend. It's awarded to a family caregiver or a care recipient for completing a pre-survey, and that's about stress. How's your current level of stress? Then that person attends at least one training. And last year we had most people attended multiple trainings, because hopefully we're always improving based upon what we learned from you about what we need to do better. And then the caregiver and or care recipient completes a post survey on stress. We allow one stipend per person for completing that cycle. But again, there can be multiple people in the household. Secondly, as a result of that Community Care Corps grant, we didn't want to have caregivers try to figure out what box they fit in and if they were eligible for a stipend. So we just went out and looked for other foundation money that would let us pay the caregiver who's a professional also. So if you're on the other end of this mixer and you're wondering, well, which category am I? You don't have to worry about that. Every caregiver that we serve through these programs can earn a stipend. So we'll go over this as we get toward the end of this presentation, but it's pretty simple, and you can do this a number of different ways. You can go to our website, which is nmdcc.org. There's a link to joining our newsletter list. You could also just go to a drop-down box on the calendar events page, look around, see what kind of trainings you want to attend. And then if Dana would, and if you're able to, put into the chat box a pre-survey, a link to a pre-survey, which we'll have time to show you too at the end. You complete a pre-survey that's going to measure your stress level, and then you take one or more classes with us, and then you complete that post survey, and then we'll send you a cash stipend. So I want to stop there and see if there are any questions before I move on to this next portion. And Dana, if you see any questions in the Q&A, you're welcome to take yourself off mute and ask those questions.
So far, there have not been any questions in the chat yet.
Okay. So let me spend a minute here talking to you about this workforce in New Mexico and why your well-being is tied up with other caregivers' well-being in our state. And sometimes I don't even say our state anymore, because there's so much going on the Navajo Nation, with your advocacy and those of you attending from the Navajo Nation. It's really made me realize how artificial our boundaries are, our state boundaries are. And so again, just another point of gratitude for you all for just pulling so much. The direct care workforce, the data that I have is for New Mexico. It is the fastest growing occupation in our state, and it's the second fastest growing in the country. 3 of 5 million caregivers beginning last year were working in homes rather than in institutions. At the same time, there are a great many barriers, most of them economic. So this chart right here shows you all direct care workers combined, and most of these people are home health aides and personal care assistants. These nursing assistants over here is a smaller proportionate share because most people would rather be at home. And look at the growth that has occurred just in 10 years. So the orange bar is the 2009 workforce, and the blue bar is the 2019 number in the workforce. In our workforce in New Mexico, 83% of caregivers are female, 81% are women or people of color, and 17% are immigrants. And this slide makes me really sad, especially the first bullet point. Wages, and 2019 is the latest data that we have. Wages in 2019, on average in New Mexico, was $10.92 an hour. And look at that number in 2009, $10.90 an hour. So it's no wonder that women primarily, but anybody in this field, either in New Mexico or in the country, feels this kind of emotional stress about their economics well-being. It's because they're barely making a living wage. More than half of this workforce works part-time, and a lot of the people that we talk to, they would like to have worked more hours or full-time, but they can't get more than part-time. And consequently, the way we talk about it is that caregivers then need to find 2 or 3 clients just to make ends meet. That is if they're in the paid workforce. So median annual earnings are $12,800. And yet at the same time, look what's about to happen in New Mexico. By the year 2028, we will need to fill 66,300 new jobs. We'll have more occupations in this field in New Mexico than any other occupation in New Mexico. These are the next 4 with the largest number of workers. And look, if you wanted a job in this field, either as a personal care aide, home health aide, direct support staff, you could certainly have it. But my argument with some state and local officials is you're not going to attract good people until you bring these wages up. Consequently, because of those dire economic issues on caregivers, we find that this topic of self-care is one that we often have to spend a good bit of time on. So we talk a lot about self-care for caregivers, and we have a woman, I think you might have attended with her back in June. Pam Stafford does a wonderful training that definitely would qualify for a stipend too, if that's if we would get her to do that again. So she talks about caring for yourself, which will help you restore yourself so that you can better take on the challenges of caring for another person. Here are a couple of signs that you might be under too much stress. Feeling overwhelmed, feeling constantly worried. That's called, sometimes you might hear this phrase, hypervigilant. You're kind of always on edge. You wake up on edge, thinking the world's going to fall apart. Feeling tired most of the time, or sleeping too much, or sleeping too little. Gaining or losing a lot of weight. Becoming easily irritated or angry, and even losing interest in activities that you almost always enjoy. There's some other ways to know that you might have an issue is feeling sad, or having frequent headaches or bodily pain. abusing alcohol or drugs, as we all know. But too much stress over a long time can really do harm to your health over the long term. So one of the partners that we work with, that if you stay connected on our newsletter list, you'll learn about, or maybe you've already seen this. There's an organization called PeopleWorks, New Mexico. They're in Rio Rancho, and just like a lot of organizations, including ours, they never turn anybody away, which is great about them. And then the other thing about them is they are all the staff are licensed social workers. And so they're doing some mindfulness training and stress reduction kind of support groups. And I think there is one that you can sign up for ongoing through December 2nd. And if I could call on Dana, I think the website for PeopleWorks is peopleworksnm.org, if you don't mind putting that in the chat. And it's a great organization, and you'll keep learning about it as one of the benefits that you'll read about in our newsletter. And I should say, incidentally, that I can't even think of a situation in the 12 years that we've been in existence where we have asked or encouraged caregivers to do something that costs them money. In other words, if we make a recommendation to you or send you to a place, or, it's not going to be something that you're going to have to, feel incumbent upon you. It's not going to take anything from you. So let's talk about just managing your stress just a little bit. And I witnessed this yesterday during the class that Valerie Sosi was leading, actually, and she used a lot of breathing and techniques just as a way to reduce your stress in the moment. And that's a really, really good thing to do. Here's some other tips for managing your own stress. Get proper rest, get proper nutrition, exercise regularly. I know for myself that sometimes that's the hardest thing to do, the most difficult thing to do. And yet, as soon as I do it, as soon as I'm finished, I'm so glad, that I did, because it makes all the difference in the world. Go on vacation. If you're not going on vacation out of town, just take a mini vacation, the way my sister and I used to do it. It's a little bit of a mind vacation, and then you can actually talk about it. Participate in pleasant and nurturing activities. And then this is a hard one for caregivers to do. I've found when you need help, ask for help and then accept that help. I know it's really hard for caregivers to do that, but getting help from I think my sense is that there are more resources out there today than there have ever been since we've existed anyway. Community, national, online resources. The state of New Mexico has a hotline specifically for caregivers so that you can talk to someone. There's also a really good location, I guess it's location, chattogether.org, developed by the National Domestic Workers Alliance, where you can get connected by text or by phone to another caregiver. Acknowledging and identifying and acknowledging your feelings is a really, really important thing to do. And it's important not to judge yourself, because it's normal to feel stress. It's normal to feel stress now during COVID with the Delta variant, but as if that weren't enough, your day-to-day work as a caregiver is plenty to do. I'm going to stop this section and ask, before we move to a closing reflection, to see if there are other comments, other information that you need. And Dana, if you'd like to come off mute, I see that you're answering a lot of questions as we go.
Yeah, so
What-
one question that was in the chat, which could possibly be helpful to more than just the person that asked, is there a deadline to complete the pre-survey training and post-survey?
Dana, go ahead.
Yeah, so our current cycle of completing the pre-survey, attending one of our trainings, and then completing the post-survey is tied to one of our current grants. So we do need to have you complete the entire cycle to earn your stipend by the spring at the latest. However, you could do that as quickly as you wanted. So if you wanted to sign up for one of our upcoming trainings in the next couple months, you could do the pre-survey right before the training, go to the training, do your post-survey right after, and you're complete. It really is your choice, but the whole cycle, we do have to end all of this by the spring, since that's when our grant ends. But most folks, we did this last year, most folks chose to do it right away, get it out of the way immediately, especially if they find a training topic that interests them right away. So as soon as you find a class that you think you like, get registered for it and complete the pre-survey, go to class, complete your post-survey.
Thank you, Dana. That's great. Any other answers you want to share? Questions you want to?
I didn't see any other questions in the chat, but I did just want to point out I shared the coalition's website. I shared a link directly to our calendar